We have all seen countless videos about which laptop or PC to buy, but all of them miss the mark when it comes to coding. So if you are a programmer or you are trying to become a programmer, this video is actually for you. By the end of this video, you will know exactly which PC or laptop specs actually matter for coding and which one you can save your budget on. And during the video, I'm going to talk about the frameworks, the different languages, different fields, different operating systems, whether it's Windows, Linux, or Mac. And by the end of the video, you will know exactly which laptop is actually good for you or not. The first decision that you need to make before buying a laptop or a PC is actually which operating system you want to work on. You can code on Windows, Linux, or Mac, but the right choice entirely depends on what you want to build. So if you want to build applications for any Apple products like Apple Watches, iPhones, MacBooks, iPads, or anything, you should definitely go for Mac OS. Or if you want to develop apps for Android, it's better to go with Windows and Linux, since Android Studio is more compatible with those operating systems. You can also code it on Mac OS as well, but I think it's better to do it with Windows or Linux. Or if you want to develop Windows apps, you should definitely go with Windows because it's much easier. The compatibility, the testing, and everything is much easier on Windows. But if you want to become a web developer, front end, back end, or anything that has to do with cloud, you can basically choose any operating systems and it doesn't matter. The easiest option to start with for beginners, I think, in my opinion, it's Windows because it's much easier. You can easily install apps or anything that you want. You can also code on Linux, but it would be a bit more difficult since the updates and everything might be a bit more complicated for beginner users. And Mac OS, if you're familiar with the environment, it would be a good option, but it still have some limitations comparing to Windows for beginners, and it might be a bit difficult for the first time if you want to become a programmer. For AI developers, going with Linux and Windows are actually the best options because they are the most compatible with NVIDIA CUDA and AMD drivers. For AMD users, you should definitely go for Linux because the ROCm driver is actually based on Linux and you can't use it on Windows, at least for now, but it might be compatible with Windows in the next few months or years, I don't know. But if you are using Mac OS, you should probably use your CPU for AI development. You can actually run pre-trained models, LLMs, and image generation models on M5 CPU, which is what they advertise. It's good enough for that, but I don't know. I haven't tested it, but you can definitely do it using different softwares and applications. But if you are trying to develop your own application with coding and using different algorithms, I think it's better to go with Windows and an NVIDIA GPU because it's the most user-friendly. If you're a beginner, it would be much more helpful. And if you go with Linux or Mac, it would be much more difficult because the compatibility of GPUs and CPUs with your coding environment would be a bit difficult. But if you are trying to learn AI development using cloud-based GPUs, it again doesn't matter. You can use any of the operating systems you want. You can even do it on a MacBook, but for example, a 4090, RTX 4090 on the cloud or 5090 on the cloud, it doesn't matter. So because your coding environment is basically in a browser and the computations are happening in the cloud, so your laptop and operating system doesn't even matter. You can even do it on a phone. So the first component I'm going to cover is CPU. So most of my friends, they text me, they want to buy a new laptop and they ask me about some laptops, and the thing they have in common is that the CPU is just overspent. Most of the times it's a high-end CPU like 14900K, which is just too powerful and you don't need definitely that much CPU for running a simple code on your computer. So you should definitely aim lower. I recommend going for Ryzen 5 or Intel Core i5 with the current generation or the generation from last year. But of course, if you are really short on budget, you can go from 2 years or 3 years ago. That would be just fine and it wouldn't make any difference in running your code. But it would be definitely better to have a newer generation of CPU. I think it's even better to go with Core i3 or Ryzen 3, but with the current generation rather than going for something old. The reason I'm not recommending R9 or i9 is actually because it consumes too much battery, and for cooling it you need like heavier equipment. You might need even 3 fans or bigger heat pipes. It would make the laptop so much heavier. Battery would be so big. Your laptop would be louder in case they want to cool that CPU, and it's just a bad option. You don't have to overspend on something that has so many cons rather than pros. And if you're going with a MacBook, I recommend going with M3 or higher. Since now M5 is out at the time of recording this video, I think M3 is actually good enough for coding. You can even code on M1, it doesn't even matter, I told you before, but it's better to be updated, because if you want to keep a laptop for 5 or 6 years, maybe M1 would be outdated at the time of like the last year that you want to work with that laptop. So it's better to aim for M3 or higher if you want to buy a MacBook or any Mac products. And if you're trying to run AI projects and machine learning, train LLMs or anything, fine tune them, which requires high amount of CPU power, you again don't need a powerful CPU. And the reason is that you can just rent out a cloud CPU, which is more powerful, and it's just a fraction of the cost. It wouldn't turn off, it's always on the cloud, and you can access it on multiple devices, and it's just much better. So I never recommend to go for a really powerful CPU on a laptop. And most of the games, if you want to game, most of the games do not need a really powerful CPU. So the bottleneck here is always the GPU on the laptops. Now let's talk about the second component, which is RAM. The amount of RAM that you require kind of is related on the code you're writing and the operating system you're working with. If you're going with Mac or Linux, I think at least 8 gigabytes is enough. If you're going with Windows, I highly recommend 16 gigs. And it also depends on your product. If you are going with an Android app, since it's emulating an Android device within your laptop, it consumes so much more RAM. So it's better to have 16 gigs. If you are a web developer, a specifically full stack web developer, it means you are developing both backend and frontend all at the same time. So you require an API tester like Postman or HTTP. You need your code environment, 2 instances, one for backend, one for frontend. You need a browser to test your frontend. Of course, if you're using frontend frameworks, those are just much more heavier than raw HTML and CSS, of course. And for that, I recommend at least 16 gigs. If you are going with a Mac device, at least go for 8 gigabytes of RAM. But if you have a 16 gigabyte version, it will be just much better, of course. But I don't think you'll need to go with 32 gigabytes, at least for now. But if you're watching this video like after maybe a year or two, maybe 32 gigabytes is the new trend. I don't know. Now let's cover the third component, which is GPU. If we only consider programming, GPU is actually the least important component that you can spend on. First of all, except for AI development, you do not need GPU at all, or at least let's say game development, you do not need GPU at all. If you're not working in any of those two fields, you do not need a GPU. If you're trying to work on AI, you can always rent out GPUs on the cloud, which is more powerful and much cheaper. And it's just much better and more professional to work with. Most of the companies that are trying to develop AI apps, all of them are working with GPUs on the cloud. Unless you are a game developer, you do not need a GPU. If you want a game, that's just another story. I'm just talking about programming and development. So unless you are a game developer, you do not need a high-end GPU at all. And if you are going with a GPU, if you want to run AI pre-trained models like LLMs and image generation or video generation or any kind of generative AI pre-trained model, you need at least RTX 4050. Because if you go with something weaker than RTX 4050, the models on your PC are going to crash most of the time. So you have to go with very light models, very light LLMs, which do not respond even as good as the free version of ChatGPT or Gemini. So they're basically dumb. And if you go with image generation, it would just take a high amount of time to generate a simple image, which usually misses the important tips that you told it. So you need to consider that if you want to buy a GPU for pre-trained models, you need to go at least with RTX 4060, which is the bare minimum. I have it on my own laptop and it's very difficult to work with. Just buying a subscription online would be just much better results, but it all goes back to you. Let's go and talk about the fourth component, which is the display, and the most important one. In this part of the video, I'm going to break down exactly why display is actually the most important part for a programmer in a laptop. If you are trying to code with a laptop, you're going to realize that the display is something that you are going to work with more than any other component. So if you have 8 gigabytes of RAM, you can do some optimizations to make it better. But if you have a bad display, you cannot do anything about it. The first thing you need to know about displays is the hierarchy of technologies used in displays. The worst ones are TFT and TN, then it comes VA and IPS, and the premium ones, which are on high-end laptops, are OLED and mini LED. And these panels can be anti-glare, or glossy. Something that I highly recommend is that your display for coding must be anti-glare. No reflections should be visible on your laptop, and the angles of viewing must be great. In TFT and TN, the angles are so bad, the colors are so washed out, everything is just so bad and annoying. And after working with those laptops for maybe 4 to 6 hours, you will feel a bit of a strain in your eye. So I do not recommend TFT and TN panels at all. So if you are checking your laptop displays, just go for IPS and VA. I would highly recommend IPS because the price is lower than OLED and mini LED. It's anti-glare. The viewing angle is just good enough. The colors highly depends on the exact model of the panel that's used. But if you go with a good IPS, like a good laptop around $700 or $600, they usually have good IPS panels. Something that you need to consider for your laptop display is that it should be anti-glare. When you are coding, code environments usually have dark empty spaces, and you usually get to see the reflex of yourself or the environment behind you. So if you even go with OLED displays, which are much more expensive than IPS, they have better colors, better contrast and everything, they're premium displays. But since most of them are glossy, and they do not have anti-glare coating, so it will be disturbing. So it's better just to go with IPS since it's cheaper, it's more reliable, and if you break your laptop display somehow, it's much more cheaper to replace it. The brightness of laptops is something that you need to constantly be looking for in the company's website, because stores like Amazon might not note that brightness, but anything higher than 300 nits would be good enough. If you work in a company that has very big windows or you work outdoors, I think going with 500 nits would be good, because the coding environment, again, it's dark, and if you have brightness lower than 300, it will be very difficult to check your code and it would be just too dark. So you have to go and change your environment to light mode, which is not something that programmers like to do. And there is something that you need to know about MacBook Display, which is that most of them are glossy, and some of them have anti-glare coating, which reduces the reflex of light. But again, it's not as good as IPS in case of reflection. If you are considering to buy MacBooks for coding, I think the display is just good enough and you're not gonna have any problems with that. It's much better comparing to OLED displays without any anti-glare coating. The displays of laptops come with different sizes as well. As you know, it comes from 13.3 inches to sometimes 18 inches. So you need to consider the optimal size for coding is actually 16 or 15.6 inches. And the reason for that is because 13-inch laptop is just too small, so you can only open one window at the same time, and your coding environment would be a bit suffocated and small. But if you go with something like 14 or 16 inches, it would be better. I think 16 is the best one since my laptop is 16 inches. I have a ton of room to work with coding environments. I can even split my screen and have my browser and the code environment, depending on the work I am doing, all at the same time. And I think if you're trying to develop phone apps, it would be much better to have a 16-inch display. Buying a laptop with more than 60-inch would be just too heavy, and moving it around would be too difficult. So you always need to consider a laptop that is something in between in case of size. 15.6 inches is really good enough. The resolution of your laptop display is usually either Full HD or 2K, but I think, or sometimes 4K, but I think 2K is the best option. The middle option is always the best. And Full HD is good enough for coding. It doesn't make any difference unless the colors of the display, the brightness are good enough, the panel is IPS. I think going with Full HD is okay and it doesn't have any problem. The refresh rate of displays can be either 60 Hz, 120 Hz, or more than that, but I think having 60 Hz display doesn't have any problems. But if you find a laptop with 120 Hz display or higher, that would be just perfect. Now that we are done with displays, I'm going to talk very briefly about laptop batteries and charging, and then the video would be over. If you want a good battery life from a laptop, you should skip gaming laptops, because the best battery life they can give you is like 4 hours with light use, because the CPU and the GPU of those laptops are not very efficient. They consume too much power even on idle. So if you want a good battery life, you should definitely go for office laptop. If you are looking to compare batteries from different laptops, you should look for a number alongside the unit called kilowatt hour, which is written kWh. This kilowatt hour means the amount of energy that you can store in that battery, and it cannot go higher than 99.9. And the reason for that is actually the limitation of airlines. So the most powerful battery you can find on a laptop is 99.9 kilowatt hour. So anything lower than 50 or 60 kilowatt hour is considered a low battery life on a laptop. So basically in this video, I tried to cover everything that I thought is important. If you think I have said anything that might be technically wrong, remind me in the comments so I can correct it and like put it in the description of the video that this part is not correct. So if you have any laptop in your mind that you're not sure if it's good enough or not, just leave it in the comments, leave a link to it, like an Amazon link or anything, so I can check out the price and the specs, and I will reply to you very shortly. Thank you for watching this video. Have a great day. Goodbye.